music today because I forgot to cue it. Um, so yeah, it's been a bit of a weird week. Really glad to see that everybody enjoyed the previous episode on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, thank you. Please remember that on that medium, I would very much like you to like and subscribe and comment and let me know what you've seen and what you've enjoyed. Because you're not here in the chat feeding it back to me. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This evening we are super lucky to have Hello Supernova Dragon Cat. That is an amazing username. Hello, hello, hello Shabella Cat, welcome. I know you. Hello my lovely humans. So yeah, we have some lovely treats to this week. We have some beautiful Raylo stories. We have a Clydephilia story. Hello, love. We have some Sansan and we have some Araloy. So if I do reference something that you don't know about the particular fandom that I'm reading about, please do let me know. I'm aware that a lot of you kind of are coming from your specific fandoms, and you may or may not be aware of the fandoms that I'm reading. So if you have questions, you want to interact, sometimes the author's in the chat, sometimes they aren't. I will put the links up. I'm really hoping that we get away with it. Do you want me to try and get the smutty bits in before you have to go back to work, Tampia? Or would you like me to hold off? I don't want to get you in trouble again. So yes, if you do enjoy the work, I do put the links up. Please go and like and comment on the fics themselves as well. Let the authors know that you've enjoyed the work, and that although you are, consuming it in another format, let them get the acknowledgement it's their work. I'm just reading stories. It's funny, I was talking to my mother and she told me when I was about 4, I was a very, very early reader. Not like precocious early, like creepy early. And she said when I was 4, all I wanted to do at a car dealership. Well, I hope you get an excellent Yes, especially if they come with you, Greenbella is at a car dealership, and if you will tune in if you get a test drive, especially if you have the salesperson in the car with you. But make them listen. Just sit down, listen to some fic. But yeah, when I was 4, what I wanted to do for a job was to read stories. That's what I wanted to do. So in letting me read your stories, you are genuinely helping me fulfill my childhood dream. Thank you very much, all of you, for letting me read your stories. Thank you, MotherKat, that you love 4-year-old me. It's nice that somebody did. So the other thing I will tell you is that those my loyal listeners, if you want your stories read, get them on that list quickly, because touch wood, and I actually have a surgery coming up in a couple of weeks, but touch wood, I should be cleared to recording quality by the end of January. So that will mean the end of the stream, because this is my work time. So if you want to get those stories recorded on the stream rather than in the traditional format, get them in soon, because I'll be going back to work soon. I'm really, really excited. I've got a queue that I'm really looking forward to recording. I've got, obviously, the incredible Annabelle David's novel that I'm really looking forward to getting recorded. And I have a cue for Green Umbrella that I'm really excited about. And there has been outstanding for Rioria Chua, I don't think I'm saying that correctly, has been waiting for some time for the rest of one of her stories. So I'm really looking forward to going back to work, but I am going to miss being able to individually spotlight the stories that mean so much to me. So you've listened to me chatter for like ages, so thank you. Look at all these love hearts and things in the chat. You're so sweet. I want to start this evening with something that I really think is quite fun and quite clever. I was part of this event. This is a story called Free to Love, and it was written as an ensemble piece by 3 different authors. J. Bob 64, Snowbell Wells, and Temporary Status. And that's Marta, Mary and Joni, as part of the Captain Swan fandom's amalgam project. And actually I did take part in this as well, and the most recent fic that's up online was written in conjunction with a couple of other CS authors. So I'm not going to read you a lot of this because it's about 18,000 words of it, and it's quite a complicated story, but it's got spies, and I really hope you do go and enjoy it if you can. This is a historical AU. It has angst and suspense, hurt, comfort. It is in the American Revolutionary War. Yes, with an extreme pleasure it's been to create the story of collaboration between Marta, Mary and Joni, and huge thanks to Alma Team Hook for coming up with the idea of collaborative fics. It also thanks Mary, a different Mary, for betaing the story, and they've written something really special, so I hope you enjoy it. Early morning dew soaks through Emma's boots to her stockings. The wetness chafes at the skin of her feet, and she holds back a wince with every step she takes. Her eyes remain downcast in the role of a perfectly submissive British nurse, ready to abide by the orders of officers and soldiers alike. Her horse arrived late yesterday afternoon to the stern face of Colonel Sitwell, a high-ranking officer in the British military who is well aware that escorting a new nurse to camp is far below his station. Last night's rain is making the trip uphill more strenuous than anticipated. Sitwell's boots kick back mud at her, staining the bottom of her gown. A part of her wonders if he does it purposely. Philadelphia. She started at Fort Ticonderoga? That sounds more Australian to me. I don't think I'm saying that right. She started at Fort Ticonderoga in late July, aiding the troops who overtook the abandoned rebel colonists' camp. The end of August found her at Bennington, caring for the few wounded left behind after their defeat at rebel hands. September brought her to Brandywine Creek before her new orders informed her to follow the river to Philadelphia. She has travelled just so far to end a few days upriver from David and Mary Margaret. Emma's heart pounds as they encroach on the troops standing guard outside the British camp. How many more can she bear to approach before she's unable to handle the heartache? All of them, she thinks immediately. She'd travel up and down the collieries if she has to until she finds him. Her hands would service each wound on every British soldier if they brought him back to her. She'd swallow back the bile while they brag about killing her friends. She'd clench her fists as they discussed future strategies while in their sickbeds. She'd trained for this. Mary Margaret showed her how to survive, while David taught her how to blend in. And Killian... Her heart lurches when the familiar accents of the British soldiers reach her ears. Emma barely pays any mind to what they're saying. Instead, she embraces the only reminder she has of Killian, the way he spent hours teaching her his accent to help her prepare for her role. Despite the harsh, uncaring intonation, the familiar words that swirl around in the air around her easily send Emma's mind back to a happier early morning months ago now, but emblazoned in her memory with the warmth and clarity of something from mere moments ago. Gillian had come to the house to report his findings from a recent scouting mission, and when he finished, she had pulled him into the kitchen to speak privately, blushing hotly as she did so, the heat from the pot-bellied stove keeping the room toasty, though breakfast preparations were over. Up to that point they'd spoken a few times, and Gillian had been friendly, polite, even playfully attentive with her, but Emma had not gotten the occasion to speak with him as much as she would have wished. Mary Margaret had encouraged her, with her ever-present optimism and her hope to see Emma as happily in love as she was herself, to take the very genuine opportunity to seek him out once and gain the knowledge she sought. Seated facing her on the rough-hewn wooden bench in the Nolan kitchen table, Gillian had grinned impishly as she settled beside him and arranged her skirts, clearly knowing what she was about, even though the tops of his ears were a heated pink that matched her blushing cheeks. When she dared to look up and make full, uninterrupted eye contact with him, Emma nearly toppled off her seat onto the floor with the electric impact of his gaze connecting with hers. She was only saved from making a fool of herself, prattling away nervously by Gillian's speaking. The gently cultured cadence of his words reminded her of her purpose, and he dipped his chin to look up at her rakishly through his dark lashes. And so it had begun between them that simply. She had asked Gillian for instruction in British pronunciation, accents, phrases, anything that would help her blend better in and avoid detection as a patriot spy among the redcoats. Granted, few paid much heed to what the nurses or women in general had to say. For once, her femininity was an advantage in the quest for near invisibility. Still, she wanted to be ready. If the need to speak arose while she was posted in some hospital or camp, Emma was determined to sound as English as any fine lady in London. Not only was it all too easy to pull up the hazy, warm and peach sunrise-gilded memories and lose herself within their comfort, but as time and distance stretched between them, Emma searched fruitlessly once they learned of Gillian's capture. It had been one of the rare bits of joy left for her momentary escape. She could envision his face so clearly within an instant of closing her eyes. The curious tilt of his head as he waited for her to speak whatever term he'd just taught her. The way the tip of his tongue poked tantalizingly from between his parted lips to tease her mind addled with flustered desire. The way his lips moved deliberately, patiently, repeating whatever sound or inflection she'd attempted to imitate until they were both satisfied with her repetition. Usually left Emma nearly in his thrall before they were finished. One particular morning, as the second stretch melted together between them like butter and honey slathered on a hot homemade biscuit, making her want to soak up every delicious sound she could, she paused hesitantly before bravely clutching his hand in her shaking fingers. "And what would you say?" It's not quite right. "And what would you say?" she asked, clinging as tightly as possible to him, while they were both still together and safe. "What would you say?" She tried again after swallowing hard and gathering her courage. "If you were captured and threatened with death." Emma held her breath, waiting anxiously for his response, all the while knowing it would not be one to put her at ease, nor had she truly asked for the sake of gaining some stoic, proper British response for her own use. She knew Gillian would never yield to questioning or torture, would not plead for his life, or make any sort of fearful compromise, much as she might wish him to, if it meant his life. Emma wasn't sure what she was hoping to hear, but somehow she needed his answer all the same. "I'd tell them to bloody well try to end me," he'd replied stoutly, the blue of his fathomless eyes almost drowning her as he held her gaze determinedly. "But I'm a survivor, lass, and I will find a way to return to you. You need never doubt that." His words had left her breathless then, and now Emma forced herself to release the breath she'd held in her aching chest as she remembered that promise. Opening her eyes again brings her back to the muddy, chaotic and haphazardly organised camp around her, which seemed all the more removed from the haven she'd created in her mind's eye because of the loneliness that immediately accosts her and the complete absence of Killian. Though the speech around her brought those better days to mind at first hearing, now they seem to highlight just how alone she is, since none of the accented voices belong to him. "Miss Swan," Sitwell growls. Emma shoots her gaze up to meet his, and she purposely widens her eyes to bear the image of apologetic innocence. The move infuriates the officer further. His white hair is slicked back with sweat across his broad forehead. The wrinkles are crumpling together as he glared down at her, the lines around his mouth becoming more pronounced as his face fashioned a sneer. He juts his large nose up at her. "Has the cannon fire damaged your hearing, or are you fit to perform your duties to the Crown and his soldiers?" "My apologies, Colonel Sitwell," Emma says, effortlessly picking up the accent Killian worked so hard to teach her. "It won't happen again, sir." She bows her head to him, clasps her hands together in front of her. A small bag bounces against her hip. She thinks not of the weapons that have been stored there for months, swaddled between clothes and hidden in her pockets. Sitwell scoffs and strides into the camp with the silent expectation that she is to follow. Hurrying behind him, she catalogues all possible routes of escape, makes a note to pay attention to the guard rotation over the next couple of days. The European theatre of war plays out drastically different than it does in the colonies, or so David has said. Rules of engagement in Europe allow a modicum of respect for the treatment of prisoners of war, varying with rank. To escape while a prisoner is considered desertion and dishonourable. Except they're not in Europe. And British troops refuse to recognise the colonists as an independent entity, tossing all procedure out of the window. Moscarlet's return just a week after Killian was taken occupies the free moments in her mind. Malnourished with a number of infected wounds and diseases bringing him knocking on death's door, will a fellow rebel from their town explain to the women that the British didn't have the care or the resources to deal with a large number of prisoners who'd been kept in a warehouse packed together with other prisoners, like a school of fish with vermin nibbling at their toes. Feces became their pillows and the dead bodies of their comrades their blankets. Her friend's words work as nightmare fuel as she lays her head down to sleep. Visions dance behind her closed lids of the worst possible scenarios. Will was just an everyday soldier, but Killian, he'd barely been a man when he'd followed his brother into the Royal Navy at the end of the 7 Years' War. After his brother's death, due to their king's nefarious orders, he swore off his homeland and pledged his allegiance to the colonies. She'd watched as he'd moved up in rank and provided crucial details and secrets of the British. If what Will saw is what the British did with a regular soldier, what would they do with a traitor of great importance? Emma's hope for the future outcome of their struggle against the British and for Killian's safe return to her had flickered, like a candle struggling in the wind at the picture Will painted. For several frightening moments when he first told them of his experience, she had feared it extinguishing altogether. Her ability to believe had already been fragile. The odds were against them after all, but as she cleaned and bandaged her friend's wounds that allowed him to clutch her trembling hand in his bloodied knuckles made the bile rise in her throat once more, at the idea that Killian could be bleeding out somewhere and she would never know. She held on just as tightly, trying to impart to him what she needed for herself. She simply couldn't give up. Killian was a survivor. He would never stop fighting. And neither would she. So, go and read the rest of the fic. So, a new beginning there of a different kind. She's starting off her spying at a camp in Philadelphia. I don't know about you, but I'm genuinely I kind of want to keep reading. No, go and read the story. Didn't they do just an astonishing job? It's quite funny when they mentioned it, so it's quite anti-British. In general, or just like me? They said it was Revolutionary War, and that's fine. I'm a second-generation immigrant. Hi, welcome. So we've just had a Captain Swan story. We have some Canon AU Star Wars Raylo. We have some Modern AU Star Wars Raylo, which is so dirty. We have a beautiful Glidephilia story. We have a stunning Sansan story. We have a bit of my own Eraloy story. So I might get that one out of the way. So this is from the longest thing I think I've ever written. It's called Horizon Plus, and I don't know if any of you have played the Horizon Zero Dawn video game, but it is just, if you do enjoy sort of crazy video games, Horizon Zero Dawn is great fun. And one of the things I really like about it is if your skill level isn't what it was when you were a teenager from years of having lapsed, it has a story mode where you can enjoy the story, but the gameplay is, I'm going to go with secondary. I'm never going to be one of those players that's getting all the completion achievements, but it was nice to have a function that allowed me to enjoy the story, and it's a really good story. So when I did eventually finish the game on what is technically easy mode, it gives you the option to start the game again in effectively double easy mode, because you get to start with all your skills and things intact. This is the story that brought me back to writing fan fiction after a nearly 20-year hiatus. It took me to AO3 for the first time because I'd never written on AO3. Back in the day, I wrote on message boards and LiveJournal. So yeah, I'm just going to read you a little bit of Horizon Plus because I think, as new beginnings go, this is the closest that I've written to a new beginning. Chapter 1, Awaken in Your Embrace. Aloy's head spun as she practically slid down from the spire. Half carried by her allies, Aaron's armour was warm against her side as he helped her over the broken steps. She closed her eyes for the briefest of moments, and when she opened them, nothing was the same. The first thing that alerted Aloy to the change was the bitter bite of snow in the air, when seconds before there had been the dry heat of Meridian and the acrid smoke of the battle. She was laid on her back, blinking at the familiar eaves of Frost's cabin. Her childhood home above her, the familiar sense of smoked meat, tan hide and dried herbs surrounded her. She stood and ran inventory of her body. She noticed the burn, the tingles, the battle wear was all gone. She had no idea how, but she appeared completely healed. For a moment, she thought perhaps she'd died. Tapping her focus, she looked around, and everything was just as it was the day before the proving, the day that she heard her name called from outside the lodge. Rost's voice. Rost! She leapt forward, propelling herself toward her mentor with all her power and very little grace, enveloping him and landing them both on their backsides in the snow. Cool your heels, girl. I was just calling you for a lesson. The dour man scruffed her auburn mane and began to pull himself to his heels. Aloy laughed. A lesson? A lesson? You're alive, Rost! You're alive! He looked confused. Did you have a nightmare, Aloy? Shake it off. We have one last lesson before the proving. Aloy stared in shock. Before the proving? The proving was half a year ago. You've been... The proving? How can this be? Rost's large hand stayed at her shoulder. Sat outside the cabin in the snow, worry lining his stalwart features. Gently he spoke. The proving is the day after tomorrow, Aloy. Can you tell me what you've seen? Aloy held herself to her feet. Let's go inside. It's a long story, and I think I need a cup of tea. The bustle of normality, stoking the fire and boiling the kettle, helped Aloy find her grounding as she poured out her story to her mentor, starting with the sawtooth and the lesson to prove her vision. She continued through his plan to leave, meeting the Outlanders, the attack, Her voice caught as realization dawned. She could save them. Vala, Basti, and Ursa. But how? Ross seemed oddly accepting of both her foresight and his death in a vision. You were a gift from the All-Mother Aloy. I always knew that. But she asks us to save ourselves. You're here. We can find the solution. She smiled at that. Anointed, they say, or will, I suppose. She shook her head. Perhaps I can avoid that too. It was Ross' turn to shake his head. I think he'll need it, if we're to mend it all. Aloy looked hopefully at Ross. We? You'll help? He smiled. For Nora, for you. The plan was simple: avoid Olin at all costs, but how to seek out Erend and gain his trust without alerting his drinking buddy. Ross put his head on his hands. Oh, Mother, save me. You want to do what? Aloy explained again. If I dress like the Arthur and Tavern maids Erend admires, then he'll follow me away from the village and then I can talk to him. I have seen his eyes follow them. Ross sighed a deep sigh. Aloy, I always thought Tirsa would handle this when you joined the tribe. He wiped his hands on his knees. If your Erend follows you away from the fire, he'll not be doing it to listen to premonitions, especially if you dress yourself up as his favourite fancy. He sighed again, trying not to notice the small smile when he used the possessive tense. Tell me about your interactions with him in your premonition. Aloy spoke at length of their journeys, their friendship, how they saved each other again and again. Ross ran his hands over his head. A career soldier, too fond of his ale and 7 years your senior, and an outlander and a mouthpiece of the Carja. Aloy, you are right. You will be the death of me. He paused when he saw the pallor at her words. Skies, Aloy, I know this seems very real to you. Aloy bit her lip and nodded. I understand, Rost. I can't tell you how odd it all seems, how fanciful it must be to you. I swear it. On the embrace, Rost. I was there. It was real. Ross nodded. We have always known you were special, Aloy. If this premonition can head off a fraction of what has been discussed, I'm not set to it. No fanciful notions, mind. Avoid Olin, meet the errand fellow. If he's half of who you think he is, he'll heed you. Then you can use winning the proving to ask for a Seeker's Mark, travel with him to Meridian. Aloy looked out to the distance a moment. The people I helped along the way, I think I should still attend to them. Their problems may have been smaller to me, but they were just as real to them. Maybe I can reach Elida in time to... Aloy faded out again. I need to find a way to keep it all together to record. As Aloy said record, her focus sprang to life. Record mode enabled. Aloy tapped the focus and flipped through the menus. It was all there. All of her previous progress in the discoverings of the workings of Gaia and Horizon Zero Dawn. So, even if you don't fancy reading the astonishing amount of this endless whip that I update about once a year, I hope that gets you to go and play some Horizon Zero Dawn, because it's a corking game. Sorry, soothing tea. I'm not even kidding. I'm not. There are 22 chapters of this. It's only 33,000 words. It feels longer, but it's the first story I wrote, and it's also the only story where I had to move to a different Google Doc because it was too big. It's Yeah. Also, my time in the in the Raylo fandom has taught me a lot more about tagging, because literally all the only tags I have on this are friends to lovers and spoilers. I'm so bad. Oh my goodness, I should go and fix the tags. So I am gonna treat you now to some Raylo. This is from Broken Glass by Abby Under 69. This is kind of an alternate Tross timeline. It's very dark. It's just a stonkingly good story. You know what I mean then? You see your Mandalorian fic. Yeah, it's... I have learnt many things from the Raylo fandom, but proper tagging is probably the most important one. Just the sheer importance of it. I get surprised sometimes. I'll go to other fandoms and there'll be like no tagging, and there'll be stuff in there that really needs tags, and just no tagging. So yeah, this amazing story. Do you read the whole thing? It has the best Stormtrooper Rebellion story I think I've ever read. And yeah, go and read the rest of it. I'm going to give you an excerpt of chapter 26, so spoilers for this story. And I normally try to read from the beginning, but this is the first time I read this story. I started reading it just before I came on. Oh, okay. I don't know. You said say your Mandalorian fic didn't need the tags that your Raylo do, but you know, maybe that's telling you that you need to see what's under the armor. No, I cannot lift my eyebrow. I shall do it with my finger. But yeah, do go and read this story because it's fantastic. But we are now we are at the turning point here. So it's not the end. There's still kind of the denouement of the story to go. But it is the kind of... I'm just trying to see... There's quite a lot of OCs in this, and it's a bit tricky. Hopefully you should get most of it from context. It wouldn't be the first time that Talia Sandaluxia had to lie to survive. Arcex, on the other hand, had little practice. At least since his boyhood, he'd need the skill more than ever now. We did it, Armitage. The First Order is once again united and now in the hands of capable commanders. Einek, your support was invaluable. I'll make you Grand Marshal of the First Order. They stood on the deck of the main bridge of the Steadfast, congratulating each other, and those that had quickly adapted to the change in power congratulated them as well. Grand Marshal, the old man paused, considering. Yes, I suppose. Of course, that makes you the Supreme Leader. That's right. Hux almost smiled as he said, I believe a parade is in order. The Lars homestead on Tatooine looked to have been abandoned for years, until it was suddenly invaded by a small army of strange allies. Luke Skywalker was surrounded by mostly naked girls and boys, Knights of Ren, Red Elite Troopers, regular Stormtroopers, and an ex-Supreme Leader, who was also his nephew that had driven out of the New Jedi Academy 6 years ago. Overwhelmed, he looked to the skies, waiting for his sister and the rest of the Resistance to appear. Ray was hard at work fixing the condensation towers as fast as she could, while some of the kids helped clear the sand from the living rooms to get everyone out of the scorching suns. Some of them had already started showing signs of burning, and one suffering from heat stroke. The worst off were piled inside the buzzard or under the wings of the falcon. Even if she got the homestead running for only a few hours, it kept her mind busy. Every now and then she caught a glimpse of Ben Solo, who was rooting through the abandoned belongings for some more clothing, anything useful for setting up meals, for way more people than the little homestead had ever accommodated. For now, everyone was on their best behaviour. The priority was taking care of the slaves they had all come together to save. I think that was the last of them. Poe spoke into his mic. The Black Sun Syndicate is eradicated. Whoever managed to survive is going to have one hell of a story to tell, Leia mused. The Resistance had witnessed a mutiny within the First Order and a quick betrayal of the slaver syndicate that had hoped to join them. Rather than wait and see what else the still impressive fleet would do, they decided to jump to Tatooine to see how the mismatched pieces had fallen together. Leia would see her son. Are you all that survived? Ziton Marsh looked at the dozen men and women before him. Only the walking wounded had made it off the wreckage, tightly packed into a troop transport their surviving hacker had managed to hijack. This was disastrous. We should have known the moment the Falcon appeared, he thought. The ragtag crew was scrambling to load only the most precious cargo hurriedly into discreet freighters, getting away from Nicadia, a sudden priority. Are they still ignoring our calls? Are they still ignoring our calls? He called over to his most trusted officer. They are, boss. We were disposable to them. Even the Empire didn't treat us this way. Everyone is disposable, boss. Not you, Tevik, you know that. Sure, boss. Ziton Moshe tried to see how he could use the situation. That the First Order had betrayed them would make the other crime syndicates wary of accepting deals with the organisation now more than ever. They had hollow recordings of that betrayal. Most importantly, they had recordings of the deal they'd cut with the Colossus's rogue crew, General Mencken, and then the second deal they'd broken with the First Order itself to supply the troops with comfort slaves in exchange for giving their ship back. That information would tarnish the Order's reputation as a brutal but moral regime, which made them a target. And they had that other recording as well. General Armitage Huck's speech on the Steadford Parade Ground as recorded on Galactic Date 23936 ABY, fragment. Our brave but impulsive Supreme Leader insisted on visiting his wrath personally on the morally corrupt crew that had cut a deal with a crime syndicate. He spat the words with scorn. To continue their disgusting trade. We held back fire as long as we thought he would prevail. When he learned he had killed Demos Mencken on the main bridge, we cheered, and for a moment he did hold it. Here Hux paused for effect. But then we heard the thugs break through, and when they fired at us, we knew all was lost. That we had to retaliate brutally to shorten a battle that would further damage our fleet, even if victory was inevitable. Even if Kylo Ren was a Supreme Leader for only a short time, there will be state funerals. This time, we will honour his memory and his ideals of an incorruptible First Order. I will assume command of our proud organisation, having been second in command for the past 4 years, and Grand Marshal Pride and the others' support will assist me in continuing our unfailing mission to unite the galaxy under one benevolent, disciplined organisation that will end our fragment. Han and Luke shook hands. The elite guard sergeant had grief written on his face. He'd lost most of his troops, but taking care of the refugees kept him busy. He'd come to meet Master Skywalker out of courtesy, and Luke got the impression he wanted to bridge the obvious gap between his master and the Jedi Master. Arkex should be the one doing this, but it's just as well he's still on the fleet. I just hope he doesn't get purged and executed. I don't know the Supreme Leader very well. We were assigned to him when Rafe Jakku was released back to you, but we followed the rescue operation he supported with interest. It's an honor to be his guard. Sure, he can be temperamental. Luke snorted at that, but my understanding he's learned to better control his temper. Of course, he still has mood swings, but now that he's reunited with his consort, it should be easier for him. Luke startled at the word consort. He'd looked at some of the hollows of Kylo Ren, that terrifying Ren mask he'd made for himself. He thought of the innocent Rey that had come to him for help. He remembered that fierce anger he had seen erupt on her face when the truth had been revealed. Then he again visioned the transformation of his nephew from the moment he stepped on board ship, terrifying manifestation of brutality, to when he'd come out of the fresher, calm and composed, having communed with his dyad half. Love. Consort was the proper word. He nodded for Bond to continue. I've worked with Archix for years, though. He really handpicked the Supreme Leader's close guard. People he knew were more sensitive to what those kids had gone through. His face fell a bit at that. We lost good men trying to bring Mencken and that lot down. And then the First Order abandoned us just like that. He looked up sharply at Luke, and the Jedi braced himself. The Jedi were a disciplined organization too, weren't they? Luke breathed heavily before answering. Yeah, they were. It's they, not us. The Jedi felt a hubris. I didn't understand that until it was too late. Bond looked around at the Night Buzzard and the Falcon. Snoke was a monster. I hope both of you can still find common ground, Master Luke. Ben, put your hand over mine. You can lend this. Michelle was sitting comfortably in the little infirmary galley on board the Night Buzzard. He knew his knee was a mess of cut and torn ligaments. He was a little giddy from the sedation. The 3 other knights were inside where Kylo Ren could keep an eye on them. They had hunted Luke Skywalker for years, and now their prey was within range, so he kept them where he could watch the Jedi aspirant teach something to the Jedi killer. They put their hands above and below Michelle's knee and fell into a meditative trance before connecting through the bond. Okay, now feel this. I'm going to probe him like you do, but his knee instead of his mind. Right. Okay, that first time I used what rage I had left, but as I was doing it, I ran out. And I had to use something else to finish the job. What? Love, Ben. They heard Cardo swear from the doorway, but Kirk took his hand and he stilled. Okay, here we go. It wasn't easy, but that was expected. Ray didn't love any of the knights, but she loved Ben. And most importantly, she loved life. Ben let himself open to that compassion so it could resonate within him, and he found that little thing he was letting grow inside of him. It was there for this. He realised he could use the Force in a way that shared, that gave of himself instead of taking away. He felt the Force move within him, and he directed it through his hands onto the path his probing was gently opening for him, where the hot pain was gathered. It worked. Ushar opened his eyes and gingerly felt around his now hale-looking joint. He flexed it a bit, then a bit more. He sat up and then stood, gingerly testing, putting weight on his leg. It was like new. He looked at both of his healers, all clear on his face, before he shuttered his expression and said, I didn't know you felt that way about me, Master. Shut up, Ren. I feel that way about all of you. The others came close to see what they couldn't believe they were hearing. That'll come useful in battle, Cardo smirked, but was still holding Kirk's hand. Judgment walked him in turn. You think we can learn that? Do you want to? Ray asked. The 4 surviving knights looked at the master. He nodded. It won't be easy, though. I hope that's given you kind of a grip into what is just an astonishingly good story. Just This is one of those ones where it's like 40 odd chapters, and I really wish I could just read you the whole thing because it's so good and just brilliant. It's genuinely brilliant. Well, I really, really hope you enjoy it. That's Broken Glass, and that's an Abby Under 69 story. And yeah, it's just so good. Honestly, if we'd had that story, none of us would have been complaining about the last movie. Some of the ship battles might have been really expensive though, but you can see them in your head. It's so well written. So we're going to have the first chapter of a Sun story called Swearing Off Boys. This is a whip, and this is a proper whip. This is 148,254 words of whip, and it is so good. So I'm just going to give you some of the first chapter, and I really, really hope that you enjoy it as much as I have. And if you're dog people, this is the story for you, because there's lots of dog people stuff in this one. Really, lady, where are you? Sansa huffed, still jogging. Her run is much longer than she'd planned because Lady ran off with her leash. Sansa hasn't even got her bearings yet since moving here for college last week, and now she's lost her dog. Great. Covered in sweat, she finally hears Lady's bark nearby and crashes through some willow trees to see her playing with some black beast of a dog bigger than her. Lady's not a small husky either. She stands bending with her hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath and call to Lady to no avail. Well, she doesn't think she's going anywhere. There's a man sitting further over in the grass, in this hidden part of the park. Must be the dog's owner. He doesn't even turn to look at her as Sansa walks over to say hello. What a large man with long black hair. He's wearing a dark shirt and jeans, and she can't help but smile to herself, thinking he's one of those people who look like their pet. Hello, sir, that's my dog Lady. Is the other one yours? He just nods and says nothing, leaving her awkwardly standing there, no friendly welcome to Maidenpool to be heard. Do you mind if she plays with him or her? I'm sure she misses her brothers and sisters. My parents raised... He interrupts in a deep, gravelly voice. I don't care if she does, and it's him. Do you mind if I sit here, sir, to watch them? I don't own the grass, and keep your sirs. He rasps, still not looking in her direction. Sansa sits down with a sigh and copies him with his knees bent. What a harsh man. At least she can rest a bit before trekking back with Lady. The dogs move to sit down over by a small pond. It's a lovely little spot. After a few minutes, he speaks. Name's Stranger. He doesn't usually like other dogs. She isn't expecting him to actually speak after being so rude and is rather dumbfounded. Oh, he's a very large dog. Did she really say something so inane? How can you call him such a blasphemous name? She says in a small voice, uncomfortable. You can see from the side of his face that he smirks, amused. Trying to compose herself, she tries again. What breed is he? Just a mutt like me. He responds in a strangely proud way. The man laughs abrasively as Stranger starts licking the side of Lady's face. They're a pair. She smiles at the sight. Considering his friendlier demeanour, she decides to introduce herself. She hasn't made any friends yet here. Oh, I'm Sansa, by the way. She reaches her hand out with a smile. He then turns to face her, and Sansa freezes. The other half of his face is covered in red, twisted scars that even go past his hairline. A horrific burn, she realises. Lank black hair hangs over the scars, and a poor attempt to cover them is missing an eyebrow even. She becomes conscious of her extended hand trembling slightly as she swallows hard, but her eyes stay fixed on his face. His eyes rove up and down her in a seemingly deliberate effort to make her squirm under his gaze. Payback, I guess. Her heartbeat has returned to normal once finding Lady, but now it speeds up again like she's running. All she has on is a sweat-drenched tank and her running shorts. Feeling a breeze, she fights the urge to cross her arms to make sure her nipples aren't showing through her sports bra. He smirks, which pulls his scars slightly. Xander Clegane, don't you know it's not polite to stare? Her smile gone now, her mouth is hanging open a bit. And then without a sound she tries to right herself. How long has she been staring? He then saves her by giving her hand, still hanging there, a shake. But she can't help but marvel at how big his hand is in hers, warm and calloused. She lowers her eyes and then looks back to where Lady and Stranger are now resting together. Regrouping in her mind, Sansa takes a deep breath and focuses on Lady. Though a part of her is disgusted and scared by his appearance, Lady seems perfectly at ease in his presence. She led her here, actually, otherwise she would have made herself known. The part of herself that also swooned just at the sight of Joffrey and his handsome looks, and the reality couldn't have been further from his initial charm. Maybe this would be a good exercise in her not judging by looks, as Arya, her sister, pointed out, along with every other "I told you so" about Joffrey. She's sworn off boys for a year anyway, only to have as friends. After everything, she's learnt to trust Lady's intuition even over her own. Evidently hers sucks. So she's moved here and left King's Landing and her family and Joffrey to try a new leaf. Still watching the dogs, she finally replies, "I apologise for staring. I wasn't expecting your scars, and they are very shocking. Must have been a very painful burn. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Clegane. And Stranger. Lady seems quite taken with him. I'm so glad she's made a friend here." She tries to give him a carefree smile, but it feels forced. She can sense his anger, which first made her intrinsically shy away. Gratingly, he spits out, "Just chirping away, aren't you? I'm not ancient enough for you to call me that. Call me Hound if you can't stomach my name." She looks down at the grass now, pinching off pieces of it, more confused about this Sander. She's not quite ready to drag Lady back to her little one-bedroom apartment. Every time she tries to be nice, he takes offence. Honest enough to not ignore them or running away screaming. He seems resigned to say to her. Pity wells up in her now, but thinking how awful such reactions would be, no wonder he's here in his little hideaway. The scars are shocking, but he's still a person. Would she have thought that a year ago? Probably not. She would have ignored them and left, hoping to never see him again. "Don't worry, I'll call you Sander from now on," she says in a soft tone, and he looks at her oddly then. But he doesn't have time to think about it because Lady and Stranger come over to them. Lady nuzzles her and keeps pointing over to Stranger as if to introduce them. Sansa laughs, giving Lady a light scolding for running off, and scratches her behind the ears. She's never seen her so giddy about another dog before. Lady pushes her over on her back, and Sansa fluffs her fur all over, especially her belly. Her favourite. It's nice to feel so carefree after all the hassle of moving. She hardly has any furniture, though. "Lady, where's your leash? How will I get you home now?" Sansa wonders aloud. "I took it off her. Here." He tosses the leash over. She looks up to see Sander standing. My mother, maiden and crone. He's tall. She really couldn't tell sitting down, other than that he was a large man. Sander seems to relax around Stranger. He pets him, pulls a treat out, makes Stranger sit first. So disciplined, he thinks. At least Lady's partially trained, though you wouldn't know it today. She's surprised Lady goes over and licks his hand. "Begging for another, huh?" Sander says gruffly, but gives Lady one anyway. As Sansa's managing to get up, she's surprised to see a hand held out for her. Who'd have thought? She accepts it, and once up, dusting off the grass, she graciously tells him, "You are too kind, Sander," to which he just mumbles a curse to himself and turns away. I just moved here to Maidenpool last week, and I hate to take advantage since we just met, but I could use some help getting my furniture into my apartment tomorrow, she suggests, hopeful. Silence. Sansa continues whilst Lady gets ready to take back. Also, I'd love for Lady and Stranger to have a play date. It's good for her to socialise. She seems to really like your dog. Probably couldn't keep them apart if we tried. He responds, it's not really an answer, but he tilts his head a bit, as if pondering it while looking at his dog. Sansa's not used to having to put herself out there to make a friend, but she really would like Lady to at least be able to have a playmate in town, especially one she seems so fond of. She waits to see if he'll say more, and he finally continues in his deep tone. Not sure why you care to do anything with me. I'll help you tomorrow and bring Stranger, but no shopping. Oh, I have the furniture reserved at a couple of antique shops, and there's one piece I found someone selling online nearby. I just need to pick them up and get the pieces set up in my apartment. You got a truck? He asks. Well, my car. She pauses, not sure. I'll pick you up in my truck, he says in a bit of annoyance in his tone, but she could be imagining it. Thank you. Here, let me give you my number and my address. I don't have my phone on me, but... He interrupts. You just met me and you're giving out that information. I'm running around without a phone or anything. Are you crazy, girl? Just trusting some strange man, once twice your size. 7 hells. Fuck me. He gives an incredulous look and then directs very seriously. You need to make sure you always have your phone, ID and some mace with you running around here, even in the middle of the day. He's a little speechless at the sudden lecture. He cares about her safety. Well, thanks for the lesson. It's just Maidenpool. I have Lady with me. She has better intuition with me and is great protection. I wouldn't have moved here without her. Besides, she'd let me know if you meant to harm me. Lady leans against Sansa as if to reassure her and enjoy the praise. Though you're probably right about the ID and the phone. She can tell he might have gone on more with the lecture if she hadn't said that last bit. Right about that lady of yours, he concedes and hands over his phone for her to enter her contact information. Once she has Lady's leash secured, she waves. See you tomorrow, bounds away to find her path home. Sansa is glad to have secured a potential new friend for each of them. Even if Sandor is a little rough around the edges, okay. More than a little rough, but he reminds her of someone. Da, da, da. So yeah, it's a fantastic story. It's a lot of fun, but it has some moments. There's mentions of sort of past abuse and things like that. There was no content warnings except possibly dogs in the first chapter, but as you go through the rest of the story, you do be aware of the content warnings. But it's just such a good story. One of the things I really enjoy about doing this is being able to just read some of my favourite stuff to great people and go, here are some stories I really like. Please enjoy them. So you got a little bit of a treat here from Dampier Drinks Espresso. It's called Ice Cream Social, and it's a Clydephilia story. It's alternate universe, modern setting, church-sponsored activity, flirting, fluff, implied sexual content, librarian-free, not religious, social event. So, I have a question for you, because this is a one-shot. So, it's not a very long one-shot either. I'm tempted to read you the whole thing. Would you like to have the whole thing? Or shall I tease you and then you go and read the rest? Do you have anyone have any preferences? Oh, it's your first. Are we popping your? I feel like I should have read one of the cherry stories. If we're popping your Clydephilia cherry. I also should feel like I should apologise in advance for my southern accents. So I don't know how to do polls in the chat. I think there's a way to do it, but I don't know how. Settings. I don't know. Sorry, y'all. Okay, so I know oh, thank you. I have worked very, very hard on the Appalachian because it's not just the dialectical tones. It's got its own grammar. Reading your Clydephilia stories actually makes it a lot easier because you kind of write that halting nature into the narrative, which really helps. But thank you. So sorry for the pause. I'm just skimming through because I'm trying to remember if we ever talk about Fee's accent in this one. So this is me reading through as quickly as possible to see if she has her canon accent or if she has one of the But you're here, so what would you prefer Fee to? What accent would you prefer Fee to have? Dampier. Fab canon accent is much easier for me, for obvious reasons. I swear half of the reason that I have any success in this at all is because I used to be a Pimm's girl in Oxford. I grew up just down the road from Daisy. So, Clyde and Fee meet at a church-sponsored event. This isn't a religious story. Basically, it's a social, community, family outreach kind of thing. Beyond mention of opening prayer and taking place in a church, religion does not come into play. Three months in town, she's in the diner, the grocery castle, and the gas station near the highway. If not for her work at the library, she might wonder if anyone else lived in town. Town might be generous, in fact. There's a post office, a unique zip code, and somehow a tiny branch of the Boone County Public Library. She's still not even sure if it has a name, or at least not which one of the 6 she's heard is official. It would be a lie to claim it isn't lonely, never mind the frustration of the less than stellar turnout at the last 2 library events, family movie night and craft hour. So a new librarian, Ophelia, Fee, she's decided, sees the flyer tacked on the local events board. Well, what would it hurt? She would meet her neighbours, maybe see if other social events had similar problems with turnout, or what they do differently. She snaps a picture of the letter-sized white sheet of paper with some information in something like Comic Sans font and a few clip-art ice cream cones, all printed brightly courtesy of someone's home inkjet printer. Oh, I can show you, hang on. There you go. Ice Cream Social, First Baptist Church, Main Street, Saturday 3 till 7 p.m. Volunteers welcome, set up 1 till 2:30, clean up 7 till 8. Fee eyes the building nervously. First Baptist Church. She can't see any other cars. All the doors are shut. She nervously pulls up the picture on her phone again. It's the right day and time. There's only one First Baptist, although there's also Boone Baptist Fellowship, Victory Baptist, and First Methodist, all within 2 miles. She's ready to leave, has her hand on the key in the ignition, when 2 pickup trucks and a 4-door Cadillac turn into the lot and drive around behind the church. Fee takes a breath and opens her door. The sign on the door to the church basement level fellowship hall matches the flyer in the library, though this one's printed on soft pink paper. The church, like a lot of the buildings in the area, was built on uneven ground, so though it appears on only 1 story from the front, it's clearly 2 from the back. Fee pushes the door open gently, pokes her head in. The large room is mostly empty, but she can hear sounds, laughter and voices, and the clinking of dishes from what she assumes is a kitchen. There are tables set up draped with those plastic tablecloths marketed for birthday parties. Every table has large stacks of bowls, plastic, styrofoam, coated paper. There are plastic sand buckets she finds hold disposable flatware, mostly spoons, and little paper signs on every table. More signs are taped and printed cinder block walls of the room. Ice cream on the 2 longest tables, toppings. Hot dogs? Really? She thought this was just an ice cream social. A shuttered pass-through window in the kitchen boasts ice and drinks. It's all frighteningly organised. One of the tallest men she's seen in person comes out of the kitchen, easily hauling a plastic crate of equipment on one arm. He has dark hair and broad shoulders, and she barely catches herself staring in time to glance away before he sees her. "Ma'am," he says, and that voice dances up and down her spine. He sets about emptying the crate, setting up an antique ice cream churn, the wooden kind with a hand crank. He glances up and then back to what he's doing. "I don't bite," he says, teasingly. "Come on in." She waves her phone awkwardly. "I saw flyers about set-up volunteers." She sees the fancy robotic prosthetic hand, but the words slip out before she can think about it. "I came to see if you needed an extra hand." His head snaps up as quickly as her hand slaps over her mouth with a squeak of horror. "Oh my God!" His face twitches, and she remembers that she's in a church, and her hands move up to cover her eyes instead. "I'm so very sorry. I didn't mean... I'll just go." She lowers her hands and shakes her head sadly. His face twitches again and he smiles. It's a slow-growing thing, spreading over his face like sunset over a still lake. A stealth weapon, that smile. And she's frozen in its power. "No, ma'am," he says. "I keep a spare in the truck." He glances down at the ice cream churn again, adjusts something, looks back up and winks. "Could use a quality control supervisor, though." Clyde Logan, that's his name, the bartender and owner, apparently, of the Duct Tape Bar and Grill. He's also a volunteer, or as he claims, he was voluntold by an elderly relative to help out on the day. He doesn't let her help carry anything heavier than a carton of cream. She'd feel bad about it if there weren't a dozen other volunteers, mostly men and teenage boys, setting up various appliances and stations, lighting 2 big grills out the parking lot, generally doing whatever task the tiny woman, who introduced herself as the preacher's wife, suggests needs to be completed. About 30 minutes before the start time, people, mostly women, teenage girls and adolescent children, begin filing in with picnic baskets and grates and grocery bags. The tables are laden with manual ice cream makers, electric appliances, purchased cartons and buckets. There's even a malt and milkshake station at the end of one table with home blenders and a battered but functional machine like she's seen in old diners. "Open," Clyde says, and Fee obeys without thinking, used to it after an hour of taste-testing ice cream. She almost moans as the strawberry cheesecake flavour one he made last hits her taste buds. Clyde watches her expectantly, and just like every time he's glanced her way in the past 90 minutes, she feels uncomfortably warm. "That's the best one," she says. She gets a hint at that smile again, and she's sure it's accompanied by a low chuckle, but she can't hear it over the growing din of excited voices and appliances. Clyde's family, brother, niece, sister, and a couple of people that seem to be significant others arrive, and he seems irritated by it. He makes an excuse and slips outside for a few minutes, watching some of the children playing tag, making use of the small playground. She's a little overwhelmed. Too many people, a lot of noise. A stealth smile that keeps getting surprised looks from other people every time it's levelled on her. She stands what she hopes is respectfully when the preacher opens with a prayer, and she thinks she'll stay in a corner, observe, and then slip out and head home to her little rental house. Clyde's niece Sadie has other plans, though, and Fee finds herself sitting out in the grass with the family. They have an old quilt spread out, and she runs her hands over the various patches, marvelling at the textures and neat stitching. The only quilts she's ever seen have been machine-stitched and store-bought, but this one is clearly handmade. The backing is, of all things, a worn fabric printed with a pattern of carrots, and she finds herself smiling down at it as the Logan family talk around her. She started when a bowl of ice cream was thrust into her hands, and she realises that the plate that held her hot dog and potato chips and a peculiar but delicious assortment of sides is gone. She blinks and offers a shy, embarrassed smile. "Thank you, Mr. Logan." Thank you, Clyde." Jimmy, Clyde's brother, and his girlfriend Sylvia follow Sadie to the playground. Melly and someone they call Joe Bang, whether that's his name or nickname she isn't certain, leave for more ice cream and just don't come back. Fee and Clyde talk about books while she tries not to watch his mouth as he spoons to let him catch her, attempting not to end up with sticky spots on her chin. She doesn't really think about the way she licks the spoon clean until Clyde trails off in the middle of what he was saying about persuasion. Fee looks up and he's staring at her again. It's more than a little unsettling. She mutters an excuse about washing her hands and bolts for the kitchen building's restrooms. Her hands really are sticky, and she's sure there's ice cream on her face, despite the best efforts she could muster while being so distracted by stealth smiles and deep, intelligent literature discussions. She bumps into someone on her way back to make her excuses and flee, and he steadies her. "Whoa, now, girl, easy there." Joe Bang. He steps back once she recovers her balance. "You know, I ain't one for religion, but I do believe we all witnessed a miracle today." He smiles politely, unsure what he means. "That young man has smiled more this afternoon in the entirety of the time since he came back from Iraq. I reckon that sold you to you." And then he just walks away, whistling while Fee reels. She barely recalls making her way back to the quilt, and she mumbles something about not feeling well after overindulging. And Clyde, the man, insists he will see her to her car. And he does. Helps her in, holds the door, clears his throat a time or two before blurting out, "Have breakfast with me?" Fee knows her eyes are too wide. Knows her mouth is open in a silent O of surprise. Clyde blushes and stammers, backtracking, apologising. Sorry. I didn't mean it as a proposition. Just that I work late, and I really like to see you again. And the diner on the corner down the street from the library, they open early, and I just thought." He puffs his cheek and blows. "Never mind," he says finally, and steps back like he's planning to close the door. Fee swings her legs back out of the car and stands. "Yes," she says, then blushes to herself. "I think I'd like that," she says shyly. "Monday? Is that too soon?" Stealth, smile, another wink. The confident, flirty man is back, but she's seen the vulnerability now. "Monday," I can wait that long. 7:30, is that too early? I have to open the library at 8. He picks her up. They have pancakes and extra crispy bacon. She'd prefer it a little closer to Burnt, and Clyde is there at the end of her day to see her home. It's a habit. Once a week, on his second day off from tending bar, he goes in and does the office work, ordering an inventory and accounting tasks. Sometimes they have supper too. The night they watch a movie on the courthouse lawn, Clyde brings the quilt again, and Fee snuggles into his side and he kisses the top of her head, and she's ready, finally, to be the one to ask the question. She waits until he takes her home, there on the porch of her little rental house. Have breakfast with me? Thought you wanted to sleep in tomorrow, spend the day at home. I do. It takes him a moment to register what she's saying, and she takes his hand and leads him inside. He gives her a hand with the bacon in the morning. They burn it, mostly on purpose. Mostly. There was no reasonable stopping point. It's just too pretty. Go and read it and like and kudos it anyway, because it's just lovely. It's just lovely. This is what I'm saying. You can't not read Clydephilia because it's so gosh darn cute. Like, it's so cute. And Dampier writes it so well. I think it's all really good. And you very nearly got the opening chapters of my favourite Clydephilia longfic, which Dampier wrote, called Our Mrs. Logan. And I read that live as it was coming along. And yeah. I'm mildly obsessed with Our Mrs. Logan, so you should read that one as well, just while you're there. Genuinely just read all of Clydephilia, because it's not a huge fandom. You could probably do it in about a week. And it's just adorable. But yeah, go and like and kudos and do all that good stuff. And, you know, and a reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, yes, MotherKat, that's what I would like to hear. An expected challenge. I look forward to hearing back. If you have a favourite, because it's quite a small fandom, I probably know the author, so if you have a particular favourite, I will go and ask them if I can read it for you. So there you go. If you manage to read the entirety of the Clydephilia fandom, come back to me for next Saturday's stream, and I will go and ask nicely and see if they will let me read a snippet of your favourite. So, is everybody ready for something a bit naughty? Now, this should have been on the last stream, but the spreadsheet that I use, the form that I use, the Google form that I use, didn't update, so I didn't see that this had been submitted. And I do rely on it because I have... As most of you know, 2023 was a sucky year. I dropped my pressure canner on my head and gave myself a grade 3 concussion and a traumatic brain injury. I have brain damage, which means I have memory issues. Which is why I have the little form, because people can't just go, oh, come and do my fic, because I can't remember. And I have to have like lots of little bits and pieces to help me remember what I'm doing. But this year is going to be a better year, because I'm finally going to have the operation to fix my nerve damage on the 16th January. So there probably won't be a stream on the 17th. Probably. Or if it is, I might be a bit groggy. And then it's going to get better and I'll be able to move and everything will get better. But my fandom has, like, the people in the fandom have been what has kept me going this last year. It's been a rough one. So thank you, all of you, for for your stories and your friendship and just being awesome. So as my way of saying thank you, I'm going to read you some filth. Something properly sexy dirty. So give me a second. I'm just going to mute and I'm going to blow my nose. You don't need to hear that. And have some hot tea. And then I will read you Eventually by an Eighth Domain. Eighth Domain is actually the first Raylo story. Wrote the first Raylo story that I read, like I recorded for the fandom. Wasn't this one. But yeah, I was on the writer's den and I'd been recording audiobooks and I'd recorded fic in other fandoms. And I just moved into the Raylo fandom, I think, in the March, and it was only the 4th of May that I was on Ren's podcast talking about being a voice actor who narrates fic. And I didn't have any Raylo fic recorded at that point that I could share. So one of the things, people will sometimes get me to record their fic, but they don't share it. Because they just do it to have it. So Eighth Domain not only allowed me to record it, but straight away went and followed the tutorial and put it up online so that I could have a body of work to direct Ren to that wasn't entirely other fandoms. Because the last thing I wanted to do was to have anybody go, oh, you were just jumping on a popular fandom. No, genuinely, I got into Raylo because I was betering for somebody in the Eraloy fandom, the Horizon Zero Dawn fandom, and I knew Star Wars because I've been an old school Star Wars fan, and they wanted a cat creature synonym, so I gave them a few. And they asked me to beta the story, and it was the first time that I'd read any Raylo. Because The Force Awakens came out the same year my twins were born, and I was really ill. So I'd watched it and gone, this is not for me. I'm sad now. I'm sick, I'm in hospital, and now I'm miserable. So I hadn't watched any of it. I got into Raylo before I watched TLJ. So yeah, and Eighth Domain was a huge part of my journey into doing all of this, and it's kind of fun because so many people kind of outside of our fandom are like, oh yeah, you mostly read Raylo fic. I'm like, I'm genuinely quite new to Raylo. It's amazing, but I read all sorts of things. So yes, I'm going to blow my nose and have a sip of tea, and then I'll read you this sexy story. Sorry, y'all, it's a particularly rambly one today. Is everybody sitting comfortably? You're about to not be. Content warnings for this one: alternate universe modern setting, explicit sexual content, explicit sexual language, cunnilingus, vaginal fingering, fluff, domestic bliss, alternate universe, domestic fluff and smut, food and chores. I love that chores is on the end there, just like chores. It actually has really pretty picture. Hang on. Let me change this over to... There we go. And I will show you. Look how pretty that is. Isn't that that's just a lovely cover? Anyway. You suck at this, Solo, Ray said to him. She was right. He sucked at a lot of things. Making brownies or spaghetti or lemonade. Asking Ray out on a date. Yeah, he sucked at that stuff. He really sucked at the last one. Sorry. Weeks. It had been weeks since he met her on his morning jog, where they happened to be on the path at the same time, where she told him his form sucked, and he still hadn't been able to ask her out. And so he just sat there after having made a mess with brownie mix. Ray chuckled. Go and sit down, she told him with a pat on his upper arm. Sighing, Ben went and did as he was told, sliding onto a stool. I really want to help, Ben said plaintively. Ray looked over her shoulder at him. She had a soft smile and her tone stayed sweet, with none of the frustration she must be feeling if she was feeling it, and said, Do you want to cut the vegetables? Ben looked dubiously at the carrots and celery. Ray chuckled. It'll be easy. You're going to use the pottery scissors. Just snip them directly into the pot. That didn't sound too bad. That did sound pretty easy. So he moved up to the pot with its heated oil and onions sizzling, and he grabbed a carrot first. It was not as easy as it looked. For the carrots, as many pieces went flying as went in the pot. Well, the celery wouldn't cut completely, though, and he was left with a long piece of celery ready to dip and ranch in his hand. Ray giggled as she glanced over at him. Get anything in the pot there, Solo? She asked. At least she didn't compare him to a little kid, so he didn't mind the little bit of a tease. Some, he said, a little chagrined. I'll pick the rest up. Ray smiled as he went around in search of wayward veggies. By the time he had them all picked up and tossed in the trash, Ray was stirring the carrot and celery and onion. There was the scent of garlic. Garlic always goes in last, Ray said. At least that's how I do it. Otherwise you'll burn your garlic and it'll be bitter. Ben nodded. He looked over her shoulder. Everything looked caramelised now. It wouldn't be long before adding the next ingredients, the meat. Hamburger, sweet pork, mild Italian sausage. He watched as she deftly moved all the ingredients together. Want to get me one of those mini wine bottles? Ray asked. Ben nodded, reached over to the 4-pack and handed her one. Thank you, she said with a sweet smile, taking it from him. For a moment their fingers touched. It was so high school of him to get mushy over fingers touching briefly, but it were these soft touches that drove him crazy about her. She turned and opened the bottle. Upturning it, she poured around 2/3 of the bottle into the pot. The final third she offered to Ben, but he declined. Port was not his wine of choice. Shrugging, Ray tipped the bottom, chin up, and drank the remaining third. She made a face and shook her head like she was trying to get a thought out of it. That's gross, she said. We'll see how the sauce tastes once it's cooked down, but now I'm worried. Ben blinked as she came to stand next to him, leaning against the island. What are you worried about? He asked. Ray sighed, looking back at the pot. Generally, you don't want to cook with wine you wouldn't drink. I didn't think I'd hate that so much. Ben hopped off the stool and leaned against the island too, so they were almost hip to hip. Why is that a rule? He asked. Why does it matter? Ray smiled at him. Because usually when I choose the wrong wine, I hate the taste of what I'm cooking. Oh, he said. So, what do we do now? Ray tilted her head so she could look up at him with mischievous eyes. What do you want to do now, Solo? Ray asked. The weight of her stare fell on him and he had to hold his breath. But then she moved her eyes back to the pot. Just have to wait for it to cook down, she said. We'll put the rest in and let it cook for a few hours. Hours? Ben asked, incredulous. Really? Ray laughed, the tinkle of music to his mind. Why did you think I wanted you to come over so early? She asked. Ben shrugged. I figured you had other plans for tonight. Ray stared up at him. Why would I? She shook her head. Never mind. Do you want to leave? Do you have other plans? Ben shook his head vehemently. No, I don't, he said quickly. I would never want to rush you out. Ray slowly smiled again. Okay. Good. I feel the same way. Ben grinned at her. Good. Good. Let's clean up a bit while we let that cook down, Ray said. The more we clean up now, the less we have to clean up later. Smiling, Ben nodded, going for the sink to start the dishes. It was his house. He figured he should do the dishes. As he got the dishes rinsed in the dishwasher, Ray wiped down the counters. Not only were the two of them had been working, but all the counters. And she gathered up all the garbage and pulled out the trash bag to go out. Will you take out your garbage? She asked. Oh, you don't have to do that, he said. Lifting it, I can do that later. Or, she said, dusting her head with a small smile, I can do it now. Where do you take it? Ben twisted his lips a little unsure how he felt about somebody else taking the trash out. But maybe it didn't feel that weird. On the side of the house, to the left. Ray nodded. Got it. I'll be right back. She wasn't gone for too long, and he went through his pantry until she found the garbage bags. By the time she had the bag in the garbage, it settled the last dish in the dish, ready to run. Ray washed her hands and went back to the pot that she had periodically stirred a few minutes before this, and nodded in satisfaction. Time for the sauce, she said. Ben watched, smiling, as she puttered about, adding the rest of the ingredients until she was tasting the sauce. With a nod, she set the lid on, turned the heat to simmer, and came back to him. Now, she said, about dessert. Ben chuckled, chagrined. I think I got lost about the part where you mix the dry ingredients together. Ray laughed. Ben, that's like the first step. He nodded. At least I wasn't mixing the dry with the, not dry. Wet, you mean? She asked. Yeah. Why in the hell did he hesitate on that? Just because it made him wonder what would make her wet? Jerk, stop thinking like that. They're not even dating. Ray nodded. Well, let's get this ready then. I want to get them done so they're ready to put in the oven later. Ben nodded. He tried to help, but after another disaster with the hand mixer, Ray laughingly took over. Once the batter was mixed and settled, waiting under foil to go in the oven, Ray gave him a once-over. Oh, come on, she said with a laugh. Can't even clean up properly. Come here. She reached up around the back of his neck and pulled his head down. You missed a spot, she said in a husky voice. Ben went down to her commanding hand, no idea why she tilted her head slightly and pressed her lips to his. Ben's hands went to her waist, completely taken by surprise. Ben pulled away a moment later and looked at him confused. What? She asked. Ben shook his head. Nothing. I just wasn't aware friends, kissed at all. Ray blinked a few times, letting go of his neck, though he kept hold of her waist, reluctant to stop touching her now that he had. Ben, haven't we been dating for weeks? Now Ben blinked. Have we? Ray stared at him nonplussed. Ben, we've gone on 5 dates. We see each other a couple of times a week. When we can, we text. All the time. Yes, we're dating. But I never asked you out, he said. His cheeks and ears flushed hotly. You've asked me out on 4 of the last 5 dates. But I thought I was just inviting you out to do things. I never asked if we could date exclusively. I shook her head. Ben, going out to do things together when you're romantically into someone is dating. And she paused. Unless that is, if you're... He didn't even let her finish. Yes, absolutely. I stared at him for a long moment. Ben was worried she'd get her things and storm out, because apparently he sucked at dating too. Ben lowered his eyes. I get it if you want to go, he said. Why would you want to date someone who apparently sucks at dating too? There was one beat before Ray burst out laughter. You're not wrong?" she crowed. Ray laughed and laughed, wrapping her arms across her belly. "It's not that funny," he muttered, crossing his arms over his chest, looking away with his face burning. Ray snorted and went off again. She didn't take long to get control of herself. She shook her head, grinning at him. "All this time, I thought we were dating and you were just taking it slow," she said with another chuckle, and looked back at her, his arms uncrossing, and he reached for the hem of her shirt, pulling her toward him. "No," he said in a low voice. "I don't take things slow." "No?" she asked as he walked her toward him, then spun with her so now she was backed against the island. "But this has taken so long." Ben moved in close, his body pressed against hers. "Yeah, but we're dating now." He lifted her up onto the island. "Oh, now we're dating?" she asked, and shrieked, then laughed as she was lifted. "Yeah," he said, pushing her gently down to lay on her back, and lifted her hips to tug down her shorts and panties. "You said we are." Ray went up on her elbows as he hooked her legs over his shoulders, her breathing getting heavy. "I did," she agreed. "And as far as I'm concerned, that starts now." And he leaned down and watched her as he blew his warm breath on her pussy, making her lick her lips and sigh. "And I don't take things slow." He licked a slow stripe up along the seam of her bare folds. She jerked a little as the tip of his tongue flicked against her clit. Spearing his tongue, he slid it back and forth between her lips, circling her clit once before sliding back down. After that, he made his way around, licking and sucking at her labia, and then he went back and started all over again. Ray's hands went into his hair as he played more and more with her clit, working her up. "Ben," she groaned, "you said you don't go slow." The last was said with a long, low moan and a tighter grip on his hair. When he sucked her clit into his mouth, Ben looked up, smirking. "Arsehole," she muttered, as he started slucking, slowly. Ben chuckled, letting the vibrations go into her. "Fuck," she whispered, one hand moving from his hair to reach over her head for the edge of the island. He really didn't want to tease her for long. After all, the longer he teased her, the longer he edged himself. So he slowly parted her lips with the fingers from one hand and slid a finger from the other slowly into her. "Fuck," she whispered again. "Is that just one?" Ben couldn't help laughing softly. "I want to feel two." "Yes." And then she was moaning as two fingers fit inside her. Ben carefully stroked his fingers along her channel, bending both fingers so the pads glided over the place inside of her that suddenly had her thighs closing over his head. Still, he kept sucking her clit and fucking her with his fingers. He pulled stronger and stronger with the suction of his mouth. He moved his fingers faster and faster inside of her, adding just the slightest twist to his wrist to make sure every part of her got the taste of what it was going to feel like with his cock. He couldn't wait to fuck her. Frankly, he'd probably waited long enough. She certainly had. She had the patience of a saint to have waited for him. He'd have to make it worth it for her. And he did his level best, absolutely devouring her pussy, fingers inside, stroking her G-spot. He could feel her muscles quivering, giving off tiny contractions as his fingers moved faster, rougher, until finally both of her hands were in his hair again, gripping almost painfully as her back arched completely off the island. "Ben!" she cried as her cunt spasmed and constricted while he gentled her throat with his fingers. He gentled his sucks and licks as well as her orgasm seemed to go on and on. With a final groan, Ray collapsed back on the island. Ben lifted his head with a grin. "How was that for slow?" he asked as he took her limp legs from his shoulders. He held a hand out to her and she took it to let him pull her up. While he had her in that position, he took the hem of her shirt and pulled the whole thing off her head. She wasn't wearing a bra. "Fuck me," he whispered. "You're perfect." "Fucking you was the plan," she said, sighing as his head dipped to take a nipple into his mouth. Ben hummed before he let go with a soft pop. "Oh?" Ray nodded as he moved his head for the other one. "I thought I was going to have to make the first move." She looked down at him as he let her go again. "Turns out I was right. How long were you going to go?" she asked. Ben sighed and shrugged his shoulders before putting her arms around his neck and lifted her off the island by her ass. She squeaked as he turned with her and headed down the hall to his bedroom. Good thing the sauce was going to need to cook for hours. "Don't know," he said honestly, kicking the bedroom door open. "Probably not until we were married." Ray threw her head back and laughed as he set her on her feet on the edge of the bed. "Oh, so we're getting married now?" she asked with a smirk. Ben grinned at her before beginning to take off his clothes. "Yeah," he said with a chuckle. "Eventually." Whew! Wasn't that lovely? So, yeah, we've gone through all of our stories. I know, right? Oh, I think we all need our own personal Ben Solo to like nibble us through the length of time it takes to make decent bolognese. So yes, do go and give an 8th Domain all the kudos and the likes and the extra kudos and comments and all that good stuff. Thank you so much for listening. So I don't currently have a theme for Saturday. Any thoughts? Any ideas what you might like to hear? Like any author friends that you might want to go and get this read because it's not going to stick around. Yeah, we've got. Let me pull up the calendar. We've got Saturday, Wednesday the 10th, Saturday the 13th, nothing on the 17th. I'll try and do the 20th, 24th, 27th, and that's it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left. So ideas for themes that you would like, and any stories that you might like read, please. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave some ideas in the comments. Yeah, if you let me know what it is that you would like to hear, then I will do my best to read it in the next 6 sessions. It's weird to think it's nearly over. It's felt like recovering from pneumonia. It's felt like an uphill struggle. Actually, I had it before, and it was much worse. I was hospitalised last time. This time they got it really early. This time I just got like an astonishingly strong course of antibiotics and a nasty burr in the back of my voice, which you can still hear sometimes. I have to focus quite hard for it to not be there. So yeah, there are 6 episodes left and then the stream will be no more. So if you want to get your stories in, please fill in the form. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we have about 15 minutes left, but I am out of volunteered stories for the day. So unless anybody's got any ideas for tropes or things that they'd like to hear on the stream, I will let you go. Thank you very much. Oh, I do love a soulmate story. Oh, that's a lovely idea. Thank you. I don't think we've done soulmates. The first story I wrote in CS was a soulmate story. I have read a soulmate story on here before, but I don't think it was for a theme. Because I did one of the red string stories. Oh, I love those. It's one of the early ones before we were recording it, so you might get it again. But yeah, that sounds like a great idea, and like I get to do, I can make a pretty piece of art for that while I'm uploading as well. So thank you very much for coming and joining us. Please remember to go and like and kudos the authors who have been so kind as to send their stories in to be read. And I will see you all on Saturday, 10 p.m. GMT.